Brilliant, excellent. So welcome everybody to Biscuit Tin Bakes Part 1. So I ran this class last year with some different recipes, but last year was experimental stage. Those were the beta classes. So this year I've decided to label the classes so that I can change the recipes. I think that's the sensible thing to do because Biscuit Tin Bakes is something I'll absolutely do again, 100%, and then we just change the recipe so you can build up a little collection of recipes as we go. And I'll try and find a way to store them all together so that the recordings will stay in one place on the website. So 4 lovely recipes, and I'm going to give you a couple of variations that you can do on them so that you really get lots of use out of them. The first recipe we're going to do is the shortbread. So this recipe, I know it sounds ridiculous, is quite groundbreaking because it's the first shortbread recipe where I haven't treated it like a pastry, because shortbread, short crust pastry, and scones are in the same family when it comes to baking. So they are meant to be very short, which means crumbly and sort of crispy. This is the first one where I haven't made it like a pastry and you actually melt the butter first. But it works, so I'm not going to complain. So you can melt your butter however you want to melt it. So it's a good whack of butter. I obviously use good Irish butter. So Kerrygold being the most largely available, and that's the most famous one. And we do have other small artisan producers who produce amazing stuff. So in a glass bowl, zap it in the microwave, lid on top, or you can put it in a small pot. And this is where it gets so easy, okay? So literally, this is all the other ingredients. Get your Swiss roll tin ready. This is 20 centimeters by 30 centimeters. It's a very standard size. I use this a lot. You don't have to grease it. You don't have to line it. Because there's so much butter going into the recipe, it makes it non-stick, okay? That's one of the fastest recipes you'll ever make. Alrighty. So this is flour, corn flour, pinch of salt, and caster sugar. I've literally just weighed them all into the same bowl. This is how easy this is. If you're adding anything to it at the moment, add it at this point. I often recommend people add some ground cardamom, which is a very fragrant spice. So sort of half a teaspoon of ground cardamom and some freshly ground black pepper, about a quarter to half a teaspoon. I'm not going to add that because this is going to be given away. So these are going out as little care packages tomorrow, and I don't want to mess with anyone's shortbread experience, but the cardamom and black pepper is my favorite combination, and then it's really good with a sharp cheddar cheese or on a cheese board. So now all you do is you take a spatula, you're going to mix everything together. This is a fabulous recipe for kids. It's fabulous recipe for kids. And you can add things to it. You can add chocolate buttons to it. You can get posh and add lemon zest and some lavender. The possibilities are endless. What I would stay away from is don't mix cocoa powder into this because it'll make it very dry. But the finished fingers, you can dip them in dark chocolate and just let them set. As you can see, this is really simple. You are just mixing everything together until there's no lumps of flour left. And that's why I like a flexible spatula for this job, because you can really get in there. I mean, look, if all you have is a wooden spoon, you'll make it work. It's not the end of the world. Okay, I just want to make doubly sure that all my lumps are gone. That's it. And then into your 20 by 30 centimeter tin. And like I said, this is a very standard tin. This is actually a roasting tin from Lidl. No, sorry, from IKEA. And then you come along and you squash. The one thing I would say about this recipe is try not to overhandle it. So once it's mixed, don't carry on mixing it because that can affect how nicely the consistency is of the shortbread. I've just got a big metal spoon. Whatever you have, you can also use a crank spatula. That's it. And just push it in. And you want to try and get it, you know, pretty even. Get it into the corners there. And we're also going to poke little holes in with a fork, as that's not just for appearance, that is also to allow the moisture to escape. There's actually quite a lot of moisture in butter. You'd be surprised. Because the flour is so fine, the corn flour is incredibly fine, that moisture just sits in there. So this will, by poking little holes in once you flatten it, look, you can get your fingers in there, but that is in applying more heat to it. And we want to try and avoid applying too much heat. Here we go. Back of this big spoon works really well. And just make sure all the little crumbs, you flatten them into the mix. And you need to get this pretty even because you want your shortbread to bake evenly, so that you don't have some skinny slices and then some really fat slices. Okay, we're almost there. If there's kids baking, let them get their fingers stuck in there, and then just pop the shortbread into the fridge for about 10 minutes, and that will chill it down again. If you keep the mixture quite cool, you get a better texture on it. There we go. Now I'm just going to grab a little fork, and we're just going to poke little holes. So just go down in rows. This is going to be sliced warm when it comes out the oven, and then I hate to tell you this, you have to let it cool completely before you lift it out, because like pastry, it's very crumbly. Okay, so this will take about an hour to bake. I've got a question. Yes, you can use a glass pan. Absolutely. The recipes are very resilient. I will tell you when you need to be careful. I'm going to check these at 45 minutes, meaning I'm going to check them at 3 p.m. Right, give or take 2 minutes. So let me give myself an alarm. So kids, if you're baking, highly suggest you give yourself a little alarm so that you don't forget things. And it's always a good idea to check something a little bit before the time, just in case it's already done. Because everyone's oven is a little bit different. So this is 140 degrees fan and clean down between your recipes. So we're working on a nice clean surface. I would only pop these into the fridge if you've got lots of little hot fingers flattening it, okay? If you've just flattened it with a utensil, they can go straight into the oven. So the reason why I suggest popping into the fridge for 10 minutes with the hot little fingers is because that melts the butter slightly. And with a pastry style recipe, a short recipe, you're not going to get as nice a texture. So that's it. And it's the same thing I'd say if anybody is making a short crust pastry or working with a scone dough or anything like that, or even a cookie dough, is if the hot little hands have been at it, just into the fridge for 10 to 20 minutes, and then you'll get a much crisper? Sorry, my English is abandoning me today. Just a better finish on the whole thing. So that's it. So this shortbread recipe, I made a whole lot for Christmas last year, and I gave it away as gifts, because you could get at least 2 gifts out of each tray, and you just package it up nicely with some ribbons, little brown box. I find these little takeaway boxes, they were brown cardboard, they're really cute, same ones in white, and some tissue paper inside, some pretty ribbon, and off you go. And this you can do any time of year. It's really resilient, and shortbread like this will stay fresh. It doesn't really go stale. It stays fresh for weeks. Because there's nothing in it like eggs that will make it go off. Once you don't have a protein in your baked goods, they will stay fresh for a lot longer. Okay, so our shortbread's under control, and as I said, if you want to add a bit of something to it, even a little bit of vanilla, go for it. Or if you've got some chocolate chips, or lemon zest is fabulous, orange zest, gorgeous. You can add dried fruit to it. I tend not to, because when you come to chopping it up, the dried fruit and nuts make it fall apart a little bit. Not the end of the world, as long as you understand that it's not going to be the easiest thing to slice and to lift out, then you're fine. Okay, so our shortbread's under control. One done. Now, you don't have to print out your rest. Sorry, this is terrible. I think I do this since like COVID, but it's only me. I don't know if anyone else does this. You go to the supermarket to buy vegetables and you put them in a plastic bag. I know we shouldn't be using plastic. You want to do this to separate the plastic. Can't do that anymore. I think there was actually a meme about it. Okay. So if you're going to do a day of baking, you need to also think about your oven temperatures. Because now this is at 140, so I actually can't put anything else in there until that's done. Because most baking is going to be done at 180 degrees. The majority of your baking will be done at that. But that's fine, because I can get all the other things done and they can just wait, you know, until we're ready for them. Because there's nothing that's going to flop. So there's nothing today that is super sensitive. I'll highlight any points where you need to be careful, but there really is nothing super sensitive. Most of my baking, and especially my desserts, are very robust. They're very resilient. But don't take this as a challenge now. Don't think you can just do anything with them. So now, it's not difficult, but there's several parts to the Bakewell recipe. So you're going to learn how to make actually a pâte sucrée. You're going to learn how to make a rich short crust pastry, and you're also going to learn how to make a frangipani sponge in the Bakewell slice. So the only part of the Bakewell recipe we're going to do is the pastry, because that needs to relax in the fridge for half an hour. So, and that's the second recipe in your notes. So you can get the ingredients ready. Okay. So there's different ways of making a pâte sucrée, or an enriched short crust pastry. Yes, this bowl's very scratched. You'll survive. Hi, welcome. All we've done so far is we made the shortbread, because it's very easy. All you have to do is to melt butter and mix all the other ingredients in and into your tin. It is really, really, really easy. And when you come to watching the video again, you'll see some variations that I give you. So the shortbread is super easy. So maybe Easter presents for the grandparents or something would be really nice. So back to the Bakewell tart. So what we'll have with the Bakewell, for those people that haven't had a Bakewell, it's a very classic baking recipe. So you'll have a layer of shortbread, a short crust pastry, then you'll have a layer of jam, and then you'll have a frangipani sponge, which is an almond-based sponge, and you finish off with some flaked almonds. Normally you get it in a round tin, but I'm a big fan of tray bakes. So things in that standard size tin that I showed you, I just think they work really well. It's nice and easy for everyone, and they're nice to slice and lift out. And again, that then fits into your biscuit tin. So rather than a wedge of something, you can have these little squares of everything. So to make short crust pastry, you can do this in a food processor with an S blade. That's really simple. So you just put your flour and your butter in first, and you zap the food processor on until it looks like crumbs, and then you pour in your water and your egg and your caster sugar, and then you just literally buzz it until it comes together in a ball, and then you stop buzzing it, because it actually it gets tough if you overwork it. So again, this is a type of a pastry, and pastry is always very heat sensitive. We're going to do it with our hands. Now, I've got hot little hands. I'm more of a bread maker than I am a pastry maker. But touch wood, my pastry always turns out well. And for some reason, I'm quite good at choux pastry, so we might do that one day. So let's put in our flour and our icing sugar. So the icing sugar will be part of an enriched short crust pastry. But because of the dry ingredient, we're sticking it in now. I've got my trolley here with my washing up. Then we're going to take our butter, and your butter needs to be cold. So this, I know I've got some South African students here, so I would do this when it's not so hot during the day for a pastry, because a pastry likes everything cold. So if you're in a really hot kitchen like it does in South Africa, we're in 30-degree weather at the moment, then the pastry starts melting. So cubes of butter for your pastry into your flour. And now this sometimes is difficult for people to wrap their head around, but you're going to take your fingers and you're going to do this motion. It's called a rubbing motion, okay? And you're going to rub the butter into the flour. This takes a few minutes, so just carry on going. I would probably use a food processor if I had it, just for the sake of speed, but it's a good thing to learn how to make this, because you'll end up doing this for a lot of recipes. So you'll see me, I'm literally just taking my fingers, and I was taught to lift up your hands while you do it. You can see my fingers move, because then that aerates the pastry. Because what we're aiming for is when this bakes, the butter is going to melt initially, and you're going to have a little pocket of air between the butter and the flour. And that's partly what's going to make it nice and crispy. So short is another word for crisp, I suppose. It's a close word to crisp. So if you've got arthritis in your hands, you're not going to enjoy doing this. It's a good workout for your fingers. So if you do this in a food processor, it's going to end up with very fine crumbs, because obviously that's mechanical. If you're doing this by hand, what will happen is that you'll have some little lumps that are a little bit bigger, and that's fine. You know, if it's not completely homogeneous, because if you overwork a pastry dough, it goes very tough. It's not great. So I would certainly buy puff pastry, because that takes 2 days to make if you make it by hand. But a short crust pastry like this, or this is an rich short crust pastry, it's quick. It's really quick. I wouldn't buy this. If you're a keen baker and home cook, this sort of pastry I would try not to buy. So we're getting there, but like I said, it takes a few minutes. So if anybody wants to pop to the loo or get a cup of tea, now is the time to do this, just while I'm busy doing this. This is always one of the fun recipes that I enjoy teaching in real life, because you suddenly see the penny drop when they experience it for real life and go, oh, now I understand what you mean by rubbing the butter into the flour. Until you've done it, it can be hard to visualize it. So a plain short crust pastry without the icing sugar, you would use that, so it would just be flour and butter and water, would be used for something like a quiche Lorraine or any sort of quiche, and then you can add an egg for richness. The cold water is what's going to bring it together into a dough. So as we're saying, we're all about temperature. So if your tap water is room temperature, then just pour a little bit of water into a jug or something, or a cup, and pop it into the fridge, and it'll get really cold. My tap water is icy. This is winter in Ireland. Okay, we're almost there. So make sure you just get your fingers right in there. And feel for any bigger lumps. So this is quite similar to, in South Africa, we've got this beautiful custard, kind of a custard tart called a milk tart. It's fabulous. So this is the kind of pastry that would be in a milk tart pastry, but everyone's milk tart pastry is a bit different. A milk tart pastry is incredibly thin. It's not a thick pastry. So I must actually practice my milk tart. It's a lovely thing to do. Okay, I've got crumbs. Do the last little check. So that's what it looks like. Some bigger lumps, but pretty much combined. And you see, if you carry on working this, butter will melt, and then it's just going to go to a mush. So we don't want that. So it still feels cool. I'm good. The other thing I sometimes make my students do in real life, if their hands start getting really hot doing that, because some people just have warm hands, run your hands under the cold tap and dry them really well. And that will be it. So I am going to, I actually have a palette knife. I've got so much equipment from the cookery school, I forget what I have. I don't know where my palette knife is, but anyway, we'll be fine. So take something metal, because that's cool. If you only have a plastic weapon, don't worry. So I call kitchen utensils weapons. And we're going to add the egg to it. This is the egg yolk, sorry. It's just an egg yolk. And then use your knife just to mix it. Okay, so it's not going to come together completely at this point. But it's just to disperse that egg nicely throughout flour and butter. Okay? And then you're going to drizzle in a little bit of the water. So it's 2 tablespoons of cold water. And what you'll find is you'll probably use less cold water than if you use your food processor, because it just mixes things better. But the water must be really cold. So that's about 2 tablespoons in there. Now sometimes you'll see there's a special pastry tool that's curved. It's a metal thing with a little handle, and it kind of rocks into your pastry. If you see one of those, they're really handy if you're keen on making pastry. So this is going to start coming together for us. And if we need to use a little bit more water, we will. But if it doesn't need it, refrain. I'm going to add just about another teaspoon of water. You will get a much crisper pastry the less water you can use. If you use too much water, it goes soggy. So if you watch Great British Bake Off, you will see Mary Berry over the years going, soggy bottom, soggy bottom. And that's one of the reasons you get a soggy bottom. Okay, so that's plenty of water, because I can really feel it coming together now. So I use 2 tablespoons and a teaspoon. That's how much I use. But you can really see that that's coming together in balls. And once I get my hand in there, it'll be done. So this needs to be wrapped in some cling film and into the fridge for half an hour. Because we've been working the dough now, it needs to chill. And of course I'm on the last little bit of cling film. Let me get another roll. I'm sure I have another roll. Okay, we don't have cling film, but we've got foil. Same difference. It's literally just to have something to stick it into the fridge with. Now you're going to get your hands stuck in there and just keep on turning the dough ball over, and you're going to pick up all those little bits. Okay? Roll it around, and that's you done. Try and handle it as little as possible. So, shape it together in a ball. So I'm just turning it around and shaping it into a disc. Squashing those edges together. And then this can just go and rest for half an hour in the fridge. The 2 reasons you are, grab a question. I wouldn't put a plate on top, and I'll tell you why, Bob. because the air will get at the pastry and it can make it go a little bit crusty. That's it. So cling film, or even wrap it in one of your silicone sheets, absolutely fine. Not a thing. But you just want to get the air away from it because you don't want it to go crusty. And there's a good chance it will with the egg in it. It'll go a little bit crusty. Now look, you can make that pastry the day before, even 3 days before. But then I find you need to take it out of the fridge a little while before you roll it. See, this is, actually must check the time. This is the tricky thing with short crust pastry, because if you leave it in the fridge for too long, and I mean, I've got my fridge set very cold, so I'm actually going to take mine out 20 minutes after. It can then get so rock solid that it's quite difficult to roll, and it cracks a little bit. So, and that's fine. That is what short crust pastry does. So you just have to find that sweet spot between putting it in the fridge for just long enough, or if you do it the day before, then taking it out before. Because what you don't want to do, you don't want to put it somewhere warm in your kitchen, and then the heat of your kitchen starts melting the butter, because again, then you're going to get a tough pastry. So pastry is one to practice. So, but the pâte sucrée, because you've got the egg in it and everything else, that will bind together quite nicely. And then you've also got the sweetness from the icing sugar. The other kind of variation on a short crust is you can put grated cheddar in there and maybe some thyme, and that makes a very nice base for quiche or any sort of savory tart. But then just to bear in mind that the oil from the cheese can then get quite sticky when you roll it. So it's fun and games. It's all these things going on when you're making pastry. There's an Italian short crust pastry that's a version of a pâte sucrée that is so soft that you actually push it into the tin. You can't roll it. What is the name of it? I know the stuff they put in it is called Panno d'Angelo. Barbie can go and research this. You're Italian. It's the they put the vanilla flavor into it, but it's their short crust pastry essentially. Quite different. Okay, so our shortbread's on a timer, and that is, I'm going to check it at 45 minutes at 3 p.m. So that's all rocking and rolling. Our pastry for our first layer of our bakewell tart is resting in the fridge. I'm going to keep an eye on that. So there's lots of different moving parts to the bakewell. I would probably, if I had to choose, I would probably look at the replay and make the bakewell, just so you can concentrate on one thing rather than trying to chop and change between too many, because that does get a bit confusing. So our next two fabulous recipes is we've got the white chocolate oat cookies, and we probably have what I think is the star of the class is the tahini and halva chocolate brownie, which is just amazing. But I'm going to give you variations on that. So I'm going to do the white chocolate oaty biscuits next. Now these are really simple. They're really kid-friendly. This actually comes from a previous kids baking class of mine. Okay, so my shelving unit, where it is in my kitchen, it's freezing. So you need softened butter for the white chocolate cherry oaty biscuits. Well, it should be cookies really, not biscuits. So I'm just going to pop this little bowl into the oven just for a couple of minutes, just to soften the butter a little bit. So otherwise it's very difficult to mix. And look, I can make it work, but I'd rather you not have to listen to that noise while it's busy softening. So the first step in a lot of baking recipes is to cream together butter and sugar. So you are mechanically mixing together butter and sugar. So typically I would use an electric mixer, but today I'm going to start it off with a wooden spoon and just show you how you can actually do it with a wooden spoon. Because I know not everyone has an electric hand beater. So this is my electric hand beater, and it's got tongs. I'll finish it off with that, but I'm going to start it with a wooden spoon and just show you what happens. So the first step, as I was saying, is always sugar and butter together, and there's a lot of oats in here. So good Irish oats, Flavin's oats, and I think, Barb, Irish oats gets exported to the States. I know you can buy Flavin's there. They have their own Twitter account anyway. And then just some flour, glacé cherries. Now you can make a note on your recipe. You can reduce the amount of glacé cherries and increase the amount of white chocolate. So that's actually what I'm going to do. So my glacé cherries, I reduced it down to 150 grams. You could even reduce it down to 100. And then I'm going to do 50 grams of white chocolate. So you can absolutely get the white chocolate buttons. That would be ideal for this. But in lieu of that, I just have a slab of little white chocolate. This is eating chocolate, it's not cooking chocolate. I never buy cooking chocolate. I think it's revolting, it's full of weird things. Glacé cherries, the only thing that I've ever seen happen to glacé cherries is that it's gotten like white little speckles on it, which is some kind of a spore. I did look it up what it was because I know it's quite bad for you. I was in Dunnes Stores one day and I saw a lot of little tubs had this white spore on it. So I just quietly went to the manager and I said, you need to get rid of this stuff. And yeah, get rid of it. And yeah, they did. I think sometimes the sugar is a natural preservative, but I think sometimes when things are anaerobic, they can just grow in funny ways. So we don't want that. So I'm just going to chop up our white chocolate. White chocolate mice, brilliant, chop them up. Whatever white chocolate you have, chop them up. And what I would say at the moment, we are going to have problems with ingredients, so we must just use what we have, which is my mantra anyway. So whatever it is, just use it. I quite like the little chocolate because it's mostly fair trade, if not all fair trade. This chocolate is like coffee, is that, okay, so there's 100 grams, so there's 200 grams in here. I'm using half, and I ate a row, so it's just under 100 grams. I like white chocolate. I know it's not real chocolate, but I don't care. Sometimes it's delicious. It's so sweet. Okay, so I'm just going to take a big knife. Where's my big knife? And I'm just going to roughly check this butter. Okay, the butter is well softened. Oops. No, it's not too bad. You wouldn't do that for pastry. Soften your butter in the microwave. Yeah, just roughly chop it. And I say I have a thing for the Marks and Spencer's chocolate chip cookies, the white ones. They make these enormous chocolate chip cookies. They're divine. And many years ago, the recipe for them actually got leaked. So I actually have the recipe. It's quite complicated though with lots of different flours. But might use it in class one day. And it's the bulk recipe, so I don't have to reduce it down. It literally makes hundreds of cookies. But they're gorgeous. These are equally good. Okay, so that's all my chocolate done. So put that aside. Okay, so now sugar in. Now I softened my butter a little bit too much. It should still be solid, but not the end of the world. So just to give you an idea of how to do this with a wooden spoon, you're literally just going to come along with your wooden spoon and you're going to use the squashing motion and squash the lumps of butter into the sugar. Okay? Until it's fully incorporated. Oh, I just got a little bit of something in there. Now with sheer, elbow grease, it comes together really quickly. So this is obviously going faster because I melted it. So what I'm going to do to compensate for this, I'm going to pop the batter into the fridge to chill a little bit, because if your butter is very melty in a cookie mixture, the cookies spread. They don't stay together. So can you see the temperature of butter is really important in your baking. So what you want it to do is it must look pale and fluffy. You'll actually see it change in color. Either with your electric beater or doing this by hand, off you go. I know in some cookery schools, they make students do this by hand. And it's just sheer brute force. That's all it is. You can literally see it going fluffier, and also you'll be able to feel the grains of sugar less, because they're like a sandy sensation in the bottom of the bowl, and that will become less because the sugar almost dissolves in the butter. So if we're making a cake, we'll probably add egg next and vanilla, but we're not doing that. We're going to add our flour. I would normally add things like flour and oats first, and then add solid things after. Get this well mixed first before you add the solid things in. And I'm going to chop up the cherries. I'm going to show you a very lazy way of doing it, but it works. Works for me. So make sure that this is well mixed before you add your other things. Now the oats are quite absorbent, so it just takes a few minutes. And if you've got kids doing this, you can get your hands stuck in at this point, no problem. It's not as sensitive as pastry. So get your hands in there and mix, mix, mix. Okay. So our chocolate in, and then the glacé cherries, you do need to chop them up a bit. So I've got scissors, which I've got where? Oh, here we go. So this is my cheat. Take your scissors. These are kitchen scissors, not stationary scissors, and just move them through the cherries. And if you don't have a kitchen scissors, you will just have to chop them with a little knife on your chopping board. This is my very lazy way of doing it. So just a rough chop, because you still want a nice piece of cherry in your cookie. Okay. Glacé cherries in. Look, if you don't like glacé cherries, because not everyone does, that's fine. Just put dried cranberries are really nice in this. Delicious. Or you can leave them out. I do think the white chocolate in them is spectacular. Does anyone have any questions?
I'm not done.
Sorry, I've muted everyone. If you have a question, just put it into the chat. And I'm going to unmute everyone at the end. Okay, so now this, I just want to mix it together, but we're going to roll this into little balls. But I just want to make sure it's mixed properly first. I'm going to pop this into the fridge for a few minutes because my butter was really, really melty, and I don't want cookies that spread everywhere. That's not useful to anyone. Yum! These are going to be gorgeous. So as I was saying, you can increase your white chocolate and decrease your cherries, and off you go. Just pop this into the fridge. So that is a fantastic recipe for kids for lunch. You know, white chocolate is amazing. And the marshmallow mice. I never really liked the marshmallow ones so much. I found them a bit dry. Those went a bit gross. The other thing you can use instead of the cherries is pecan nuts. Pecan nuts or hazelnuts are really, really good. So that is a really solid, versatile oat cookie recipe that you can play with. I'm going to do another baking class. I've got a few planned, but the next one probably is healthy-ish baking, because I think we probably need to lighten up a little bit at some point. So I'm going to do things like flapjacks and things like that. It still will have butter and sugar and things, but just recipes that use less, that require less. We may be using some dried fruit and things, so you don't need to add so much sugar. I have tried lots of recipes using alternative types of sugar, like date sugar and date syrup, and avocado instead of butter and all this. And there's some good things, but what I do find, they end up being very expensive to make, buying all these specialty ingredients. So it's not suitable really for the year 2021 for most of us. And I don't think nutritionally they're necessarily any better, if I'm absolutely honest. I think the time though that you have to be careful is if you have to avoid gluten. Obviously then you need to be really, really careful. Avoiding nuts, another one, because I mean that's a very serious allergy. And then if you do have problems with blood sugar, like type 2 diabetes, obviously you're going to moderate how many of these things that you eat, so you don't go overboard. Let me just check. We're a little bit away still from checking the shortbread. Okay, I'm just checking my time, so my alarm's going to go off shortly for that. Actually, I've got a lovely mushroom timer, and I've got loads of cupcake timers that I bought for the cookery school. I have everyone with their timer, timing the different things. It's amazing how easy it is to forget. Okay, so our pastry's chilling in the fridge for our bakewell. Our shortbread's going to come out quite soon, and I'm just chilling the white chocolate oat cookies for a little bit because it was so melty, and I just don't want my cookies going like that onto the baking tray. Not the end of the world if it does it, but you're taking away from the crispiness of it, that's for sure. So I'm going to give you guys just a little bit of time to catch up, because I know you are all busy baking away furiously, possibly cleaning down furiously. Because not everyone's going to have the same amount of bowls and things as me. I appreciate that. So you need to weigh things out and do all of that. I've said this before, I almost exclusively use glass and metal bowls, largely so that my students can see what I'm doing, and also because I gave my plastic ones away to a home ec class. But if you are taking a baking at home, just go and get a load of cheap plastic bowls from the Crazy Store or Deals or something like that, and just use them until they die, so they're not single use, and then we can live with that. Glass dishes and bowls and things that are heat resistant, because remember we want to take them in and out of the microwaves and things like that. Not all of them are heat resistant, so you just have to be a little bit careful when you buy them. So brands like Pyrex would be well known as proper tempered glass, and they are expensive. If you're in Ireland, I buy a lot of my Pyrex from TK Maxx. So I in the UK has got TK Maxx, and in the States you've got TJ Maxx. In South Africa, I actually, Mambo's, the plastic store, actually sells quite a lot of glass. Don't know why or how, but they do. So keep an eye out for that, and of course for sales. So dark chocolate tahini brownies. I'll just start off talking about the ingredients for a little bit. So quite simply, you're going to have a mixing bowl where you're going to mix your eggs and your sugar in. So that's similar to creaming the butter and the sugar, and it's going to increase in volume, and it's really nice and beautiful and light and fluffy. Then in another bowl, you're going to have your butter and your chocolate, and you're going to put this to sit on top of a little pot. So your pot needs to be fairly small so that your glass bowl will sit in it. You can also use a metal bowl for this, and it just must conduct heat. So a plastic bowl won't work so well. So glass bowl or ceramic, glass, ceramic or metal. Glass, I prefer glass for this job, if you have it. And then I use, I mean, my regular students know this, can't see it. I use these little, they look like little chocolate buttons, but it's what we call couverture. So this is the stuff chefs buy in and pastry chefs buy in. That is special Belgian chocolate that you can heat and temper. But if you just buy ordinary slabs of chocolate, like quite a high cocoa percentage, 74%, then that's what you can use in this, and just break it up into pieces. So just dice up the butter, and you've got your dark chocolate, whether it's broken up slabs or it is the couverture like this. So the brand I use is called Calibo. So this is quite a famous brand called Calibo. You can get this the world over. Now this you will get from anywhere that will supply chefs or specialty shops and things like that. And it is a lot cheaper if you buy it wholesale. And like I said, it's very, very good quality, and you can temper it to make lots of chocolatey things. So unfortunately, when sometimes you shop bought chocolate, it can seize. And you'll see it going all weird and curdled, and that's what we call seizing. And that happens for a number of reasons. It's sometimes a temperature thing, because chocolate is very moody, it only likes certain temperatures. And sometimes it's the things that have been added to chocolate that we eat. So they add things like oils and soy lecithin. So that affects how that chocolate is melting, how it's working for you. But largely it should work. For something like this, you could even use something like a Bourneville, which is 55%. It would still be cheaper than the 75, and it's dark enough to use. Because I appreciate that sometimes these recipes get really expensive to make. So this is a treat to make this. So we've got our chocolate and our butter melting. So I'm going to keep an eye on that because I don't want it to get too hot. And I'll show you all the steam escaping and what we're looking for. We've got flour, we've got cocoa powder, we've got our eggs, we've got our caster sugar, and our special ingredients. We're going to put a little bit of tahini on top and zigzag it through. So tahini is one of the main ingredients in hummus. I'm sure you all know and love hummus by now. So hummus is mostly chickpeas, and the other important ingredient is tahini. This is a sesame seed paste. So it's a tiny little sesame seeds that have literally been blitzed and blitzed and blitzed until they form a paste, and then you'll have the oil as well. It's a lovely, nice, nutty flavor. It is quite bitter, but it's great for balancing very sweet things like the chocolate and all the sugar. Brownie recipes have a lot of sugar in them, traditionally. This one's got a little bit less, and it doesn't look it, but it actually has a little bit less. There's the halva takes up a bit of the space and it lessens it. So the other ingredient that you might struggle to get is halva. So halva is the sesame seed paste, the tahini, that gets whipped up with crystallized honey or sugar. So it's a sugar syrup that it's quite tricky to make if you make it yourself, but it becomes like spun sugar or spun honey. It crystallizes, and then you end up with these little cakes of halva. Okay, so depending on how much you like halva, you can use one of these. I mean, this particular brand is 75 grams. You can use the full 130 grams, or you can just pop in one little punnet. It's entirely up to you. I'm giving these away, so I'm just going to put one punnet in because I love and adore halva, but it's not everybody's thing. I appreciate it's not everybody's thing. So if you don't want to use halva or you can't get it, what you can do is you can add chocolate buttons to the recipe. So then you'll have melting blobs of chocolate in your brownie, which is amazing. You can add frozen raspberries, because then as they bake, they defrost. Amazing. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. You can add nuts if you want to. So those are the three things you can add instead. So my chocolate's coming up to the boil, my water's coming up to the boil. So nuts, chocolate buttons, or frozen raspberries. So it's actually quite a versatile brownie mix in that sense. So I'm just going to chop this up a little bit, and then you're going to have blobs of halva in the recipe. So it's really not a difficult recipe, and you're learning good techniques, but it's quite modern, using the halva in it. myself in line. Oh, goodies, there we go. That's a palette knife. That's not going to help me. So when you're melting your chocolate in the glass bowl, that's called a bain-marie, which is French for water bath. It mustn't get too hot. So if the bowl starts shaking and lots of steam is escaping out the sides, you need to turn down the temperature because it's going to, oh, that's my shortbread. It's going to burn the chocolate. So that's my alarm for the shortbread. And I'm also going to take out my pastry because it's been in for 25 minutes and I've got this very cold oven. So let's check out, okay, so my shortbread is done after 45 minutes. So I'm going to show you mine. Okay, so can you see it's gone a golden color, but then there's almost like a gray brown color in the corners, okay? So it's not brown, it's like a gray brown. That's a sign that it must come out because that's the sugar starting to burn. Because typically a shortbread is very, very pale in color. But you want to strike the balance between, I'm going to amp up my oven to 180. You want to strike the balance between it being cooked through completely, but sometimes it can be soggy underneath, and then being overdone. All right, so 45 minutes in my oven. So check yours at 45. I have quite a powerful fan oven, okay? So I'm taking a bread knife, all righty. I'm multitasking here. I'm going to stir my chocolate and my butter quickly. Here we go. So take a bread knife. It needs to be a serrated knife to do this. It works better. And shortbread typically is long pieces. But if you want to cut into squares, by all means, go for it. I'm trying to remember. Oh, yes. Okay, so I got 3 this way the last time. Anyway, I'm going to go for it. I should really make a note of how many I normally get out. Okay. So you have to do this as soon as it comes out the oven. And it's going to be very soft. Do not be alarmed. That's the way it is. Okay, I could have got another row out of this. And then this way. I'll just do this. So let it cool completely, and then we'll lift it out with a palette knife. The other little thing you're going to do now is sprinkle over caster sugar. I'm sure you would have seen that when you've bought shortbread before you've made it yourself. So it's going to be a couple of tablespoons of caster sugar. And this adds a nice textural difference to it. And visually it's also really nice. So I'm putting loads on. I'm going to make it non-stick. One of the things the caster sugar does. And then give it a shake. So you're going across the surface and it's going to get into the crevices a little bit. Okay, so this I'm going to push onto my shelf. And cool down for a good hour and a half, maybe longer. Because remember, it's also in metal. It's in a metal dish. I'm going to move this here. So it's going to take even longer to cool down. All right. So this is my glass bowl. This is for the brownies, and I'm melting together the chocolate and the butter. And I just turned down the heat because it was getting too hot. So just be patient with it. You don't want it to get too hot and then it curdles on you, but we are getting there. So it's a very luxurious brownie. You get some recipes that just use cocoa powder, but it's tricky then to get that very squishy, soft center. Okay, I'm going to move it back to this back half so that you can, oopsie, you can hear that hob is hot. And we'll get back to our mixture. I'm going to chop up the halva a little bit smaller. and into a little bowl. Actually, let me just leave it on the chopping board. What am I doing? Let me not dirty another thing. So the chocolate is doing its thing. We're happy with that. So we're going to come along and whisk up our eggs and sugar together. And again, this is quite an important step in a lot of recipes because you're trying to create volume when you do this. And you'll see the whole mixture go really pale and fluffy and it poofs up. Now look, you can do this by hand. This will be quite tiring, but I'm going to use my electric mixer. Oopsie. Start off on a low speed, and then you can work your way up. And just spend a couple of minutes doing this, because this is important for the texture of the brownie. So I put it on full speed now, and you can see it's going paler, and it's going to increase a little bit in volume. Not like an egg white, but you can see it growing in volume as you're whisking air into it. So spend a few moments doing that, stirring my chocolate. So it actually doesn't even look yellow anymore. It's a very pale, creamy color now. I'm just going to give it another minute. These are actually quite powerful hand mixers, but you can get them very economically from a supermarket even. You don't have to spend a lot of money on them. This is a nice little Kenwood. Okay, so that's looking good. So like always with baking, I tell people to scrape down the sides. I just need another spatula. And I have so many. Where is it? There we go. I just sort out my utensil containers I can't see. So scrape, 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 scrape underneath. And it's fabulous. It actually looks like cream. It doesn't even look like sugar and egg. It's like cream or mayonnaise. Okay, so my chocolate is rocking and rolling. A little bit too hot, turn it down. You can actually hear that noise of the air escaping. Why is my hand mixer so quiet? It's because it's a Kenwood K mix. It's their top of the range. All the appliances are really good, but the K mix is a little bit better than the others. So my stand mixer, my immersion blender, my hand mixer, all K mix. So I'm also professional. Well, I'm meant to be. My chocolate's almost done. You can that sizzling you hear is the steam escaping or water escaping and plopping on the hob. I've turned it down a bit. I'll show you what it looks like in a minute when it's completely melted. You're just really waiting for the butter to melt. Okay. So while that's doing its thing, I still have to add the flour and the cocoa powder to this, but the chocolate needs to go in first, because otherwise weird things happen to the texture. And we don't need any weird things happening to our texture. So in the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to line my tin. So this again is a standard 20 by 30 centimeter Swiss roll tin. And I'm going to use a silicone sheet. And you just crumple it up and then it will take on the shape of whatever container you use. But if you don't have a silicone sheet like this, you can just use parchment paper. I tend to avoid using foil for things like this because your batter sticks to it. So any sort of parchment paper, greaseproof paper, whatever you have, you can use that. I just like the silicone sheets because they're reusable, and I'm sick to death of cutting up paper. So for my cake tins and things, or anybody's cake tins, you can cut out a circle and line, say, the bottom of your cake tin. Do the same with your bread tins, and you just use that same piece for that particular tin again and again. So much easier, I promise you. One more little lump of butter. So we're just going slowly and gently with the temperature. Happy days. Okay. If anybody has any more questions, drop them into the chat. But I think I think people are more or less keeping up. Or we're going to make it later. Okie dokes. So I'm going to put down a tea towel. You'll see this. I'm going to lift my chocolate with a clean, dry tea towel. It must be dry. It doesn't have to be so much clean, but dry. I'm going to lift my melted chocolate, the bowl, off the boiling water and just put it here because I don't want to burn myself with that. Okay. And now here comes the important bit, is I'm going to put the chocolate in with the egg, but this needs to be done carefully. Just get my metal spoon. Okay, so put a ladle in first. This is really important. Put a ladle of hot chocolate in first. I've got a whisk, okay? Any whisk that you have, this is just a very fancy flat one. But grab yourself a whisk, or you can, to be honest, you can do this with you can fold it with your spatula as well. Start with folding. Put one ladle of chocolate in, because we don't want to turn our egg into scrambled egg, okay? So fold the first ladle of chocolate in. And you see, you don't want to do this in too much of a hurry because then you bash out all the air as well. So we don't want that. So one ladle of chocolate in, another ladle in. Don't overmix it at this point because you just want to, you're trying to temper the egg mixture, because if I threw in all this boiling hot chocolate first, I'm going to end up with scrambled eggs. So you can scrape the bottom of the bowl a little bit. And another bit of chocolate. So we're folding the chocolate into the egg mixture, gradually and slowly. So be careful, this bowl can still be very hot. So you can use your dry tea towel. The reason why I bang about dry tea towels is because if it's wet, it conducts the heat and you can really burn yourself quite nastily. Okay, so now most of my chocolate is in. So I'm going to take my spatula, my other spatula, and scrape the bowl. I just use whatever tool is to hand. So I'm scraping with my whisk. I'll be scraping with my spatula in a second. I've even been known to use pens when making choux pastry to poke the holes because I didn't have the right thing close to me. So scrape your bowl really well. Get someone to help you hold the bowl. It's actually cooled down now a lot, but it is quite heavy. So get someone to give you a hand if you're finding this too heavy. Make some space. And now you can fold or use your whisk. Folding is just as easier. I've got two spatulas in here now. Turn off your hob. And that's just the last little bit of chocolate we're folding in. Okay. Happy days. So I've turned up my oven to 180 and it should be well heated up by now. This is the flour and cocoa powder. A little pinch of salt. Covering myself in chocolate. Okay, I'm going to change to whisk now because it'll be quicker to incorporate it, and it won't bash out so much air if I'm persevering with a spatula. I'll come back to the spatula in a sec when we pouring it into our bowl. Yum, yum. This is a really, really good brownie mix. It makes for very, very gooey brownies. But the most important thing when you're making this is don't overbake them. I'm going to put them on a timer for 17 minutes because my oven is quite powerful. And when it comes out, it's going to seem like it's really gooey, but it carries on baking for a little bit and it will solidify. So I'm just looking that all the lumps of flour have gone. They have. So I'm done mixing, no over mixing. Let me get my prepared tin. Okay. There's my prepared tin, and in we go. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Pull my silicone. I try and standardize my recipes as much as possible to use the same tins, to cut down the amount of tins that you use, but then also your results are better. The more you can standardize the size tins you use, I find the better the results. So I've had to change quite a lot of recipes to reflect this. So scrape your bowl really well because you'll be amazed at how much is actually sitting in there. And that could be another quarter brownie for you. See, there's a good another tablespoon in there of brownie mix. Excellent. There's a wash. So now I'm going to give this a shake to even it out. And I'll answer, actually, you know what? It's solidifying. It's not even going to be, it's not going to be shakeable. Then we're going to add our halva and our tahini. So just squash this into the corners. There we go. And try and get it fairly even so that it bakes evenly. Okay. Happy days. Okay. Scrape it off. I will get you in a second. Nice and messy, covered in chocolate. Okay. No, when your shortbread is finished, if yours is completely done, it needs to cool. Leave it alone to cool in the tin. Don't put it back in the oven, it's done. Yeah, so just leave it to cool down in room temperature, just on a shelf somewhere. Maybe put something down so you don't burn your countertop. Yes, I'm sorry. This was a very last minute class. So all the kids' classes this week have been last minute. I suddenly woke up to the fact that it's school holidays and people are miserable, stuck at home, and we can't do anything, and it's lockdown, and it's just bad. So, so that's why the kids' classes. But you'll get the replay a little bit after the class, and then you can just do it at your own pace. Yeah, so shortbread, just to reiterate, you're going to slice it with your bread knife, and then just go stick it out the way somewhere. The dog can't get it, whatever, and it's going to take a good hour and a half to cool down. So just leave it alone, because if you try and lift it out of that tin too soon, it's just going to break, it's going to crumble, and you're going to cry. So we don't want that. So this is my brownie mix, and I keep on covering myself in chocolate everywhere. So now I have to add the halva, which is that lovely sesame confection. So now this particular halva comes from Greece, but you can get halva from Israel, all, you know, literally it's all over the Mediterranean. And I'm going to push these in a minute. I'm just trying to scatter them evenly, and then we push them down into the brownie mix. We don't want them sticking out because there's a lot of sugar in it, or honey. Normally it's only honey, and it's going to burn. So we don't want that. And I'd say if there's children doing this, they're probably covered in chocolate, because I'm covered in chocolate. So squash it down. Now the brownie is going to puff up a little bit as well, and it will sort of surround the halva. So don't panic, but you just don't want it floating around on the top too much. Okay, so then we're going to come along with our tahini. Now you don't absolutely have to do this. The halva might be enough for you, because that is tahini paste. You can do one or the other. But just to be really all about the tahini, you can take about 60 grams of tahini. Now mine's going quite solid, because now it's winter here and it's so cold. So if it's warmer, you'll be able to swirl this. So you want about 10 little blobs of this covering the surface of the tahini, and then you should be able to swirl it. But it's so cold here, even with the ovens and the heating and everything else, that it's not swirlable. So what we're going to do is we're just going to push in the tahini as well, and that will melt in the baking process. So it's still going to look really nice, not quite as swirly, and then just flatten the back of the brownie mix again, so that it's nice and more or less even. It's not perfectly even. I use tahini a lot in smoothies. I love it. So that is our brownie mix, our beautiful tahini chocolate brownies. And I am going to put a timer on this, actually for 16 minutes, just to be safe. Like I said, mine is my oven is really powerful. There we go. I've got so many alarms on this now. Okay, so that's brownies done. So when they come out, I would still leave them to rest in the tin for a few minutes, up to about 10 minutes. Any baking I do, I always leave them in the tin for 10 minutes before I try and turn them out, even if I'm serving it warm, because if you try and get it out too soon, it crumbles. So if you leave it to relax and just to cool down a little bit, it's much easier to dish it up. It really is. I know we're all impatient and we want things now, but honestly, it would be much nicer if you do that. I'm just clearing away bowls. Even with a trolley, I'm running out of space. Alrighty. So, just to recap, our shortbread is out of the oven. It's sliced up. It's been covered in caster sugar, and that's just busy cooling. So that's fine. That's under control. And we'll lift that out, and that will just go into an airtight container, and that will stay fresh for weeks. It's very resilient. Our brownies are in. They're on a timer. So when those come out, use your oven gloves to take them out the oven, and then leave them to rest for 10 minutes, and then you can serve them with ice cream or cream, and they will be warm. It's another reason why I don't make sure I don't overbake the brownies, because say for instance you don't eat all of them now, and you want to have it more as a dessert rather than like a tea time treat, then you can microwave it for a little bit and it's not going to kill the brownie. Whereas initially, if you've overbaked it, you can't do that. But they're also delicious cold. I mean, they really don't have to be heated up at all. This is meant to be a biscuit tin bakes class, but a brownie obviously makes a very nice dessert. I would probably serve it with some raspberries. So frozen raspberries, just leave them to defrost. Are fabulous because they're not in season in winter. Obviously in South Africa you can get raspberries, but they're not in season in Ireland at the moment. Let me give my hands another wash. And actually let me just get rid of this bowl. I always encourage my students to clean as they go. But I don't have the time now because I have to teach you what to do next. Right. So it's the same temperature as the brownies, 180 degrees, is our white chocolate chip cookies, our OT cookies. So I'm going to roll them out. I'm going to show you what to do with them. And I'm going to get them onto a baking tray as well and into the oven. Okay? So as I was saying, most of your baking will be done at 180. So you can coordinate a couple of recipes, but then that also saves on electricity. Makes us more environmentally friendly if we do it like that. So just for the sake of brevity, I'm just going to use a small tray. This is a half-size tray, and I'm just going to do a couple of the white chocolate chip cookies, because otherwise I'll be here the whole day rolling, and I'm sure you want to see the other recipes. So again, just line your tray with baking parchment or some silicone sheets. And the reason why we do this largely is to make washing up easier, you know, which is important. You know, it takes the fun out of cooking and baking if you end up having to wash things excessively. Actually, let me be clever about this. I am going to roll my pastry base first. Excuse me. So that's the white chocolate chip cookies. We're just going to roll those into balls and onto the tray. So I'm not worried about that. I'm going to do my pastry first, because that needs to bake and then cool for 10 minutes. So that is the pastry we made earlier. That is going to be the base of our Bakewell tart. Let me just get another tray. I wanted a tray with more square sides, but anyway, I'm going to use this one. This is still the same dimensions. It's a 20 by 30 centimeter tray. It's a little bit rounded because it's a roasting tin rather than baking tin. But as I was saying to you earlier on, use what you have. I gave away quite a few of those tins to the homemaker class, which I absolutely don't regret. They're welcome to them. It's just left me a little bit short for my own classes. So I also bake a lot in square tins. So you need a little bit of flour, and we're going to put it down on our surface. All right. Okay. And then we also need a rolling pin. I like the rolling pins with the handles because I know that's not everybody's thing. However you like it, go for it. Your pastry's been resting in the fridge for 20 minutes. Get it out of the fridge. Don't put a huge amount of flour onto your surface, and make sure your surface is dry, because that's going to incorporate into the pastry and it's going to change the consistency of it. Okay, so we don't want to do that. So just a little sprinkle, like tiny sprinkle of flour, and then I roll my rolling pin in it as well. You're just making everything non-stick. That's the point of this, is to make it non-stick. So this is where the fun begins, rolling short crust pastry. And a pâte sucrée, which is what this guy is very sticky. Okay, so roll, turn to 90 degrees, roll, turn to 90 degrees, roll, turn to 90 degrees, roll. Okay. And try and touch it as little as possible. So this is going to give you a round shape, okay? We want a rectangular shape. I'm going to show you how to achieve that, all right? So my last turn. So we've turned it 90 degrees about 8 times. Now I am going to just carry on rolling it okay? And that's going to give me a rectangular shape. You see, I'm not turning it at 90 degrees. So now I will get a rectangular shape because I'm just doing it all in one direction. And try and do it evenly. Don't roll one section more than the other. Be quite gentle. Pastry is delicate. We're not rolling out dough for pizza base, as an example. So, oopsie, be quite delicate. All right. So I'll stop for a second. So we had a round disc. I rolled. I turned it to 90 degrees. I rolled. Turned it to 90 degrees, and I rolled. That keeps it in a circular shape. I did that about 8 times, just to get it nice and even, and to get my edges nice and rounded. And then I stopped doing that, and I just carried on rolling it in the same direction. All right, so now what we're going to do, my tin is a little bit wide, but that's okay. So pay attention, this is important. This is quite sticky, and it's quite delicate, okay? So we need some help to lift it up without it breaking, all right? So you're going to take your pastry and delicately with your fingers, you're going to roll it over the rolling pin. You're going to scoot your dish underneath, and then you're going to unroll it. Did everyone see that? Because I can't repeat it. But on your playback, you can watch it again. All right? So that's what I have. And then I lift the pastry and just squash it into the side. And I'm going to trim this a little bit. Just with my fingers. You can also use a knife. And I've got 2 little naked edges. So I'll just plug the naked edges. Okay. So now we're going to bake the pastry, and this is called baking blind. Well, actually, I'm not even going to bake it blind. I'm just going to poke holes in it. So this is to, what this is going to do is so we don't have raw pastry at the bottom of our tray bake. So poke some holes in it. And that, again, is to allow the steam to escape, like our shortbread. So lots of similarities with a shortbread. There we go. And into the oven. So the rolling pin trick is the most important part of it. So let me just check my time. Another alarm going on. So strictly 10 minutes for this, because it's going to carry on baking a bit later, but we don't want to make it completely raw. There we go. There are some recipes, I mean, I've got some frangipani type recipes where the pastry stays raw and just pour in the frangipani on top, and that's it. Not for this particular recipe. So I'm just going to take a sponge and I'm just going to wipe down my counter because I now have flour everywhere. Clean down a little bit. You don't have to clean it perfectly now, but I would just get rid of the worst of it, because I'll just make cleaning later on much more difficult. There's me, I'm going to do it properly. There we go, and just dry it down quickly. So now we can come back to our white chocolate cookies, and I'm just going to roll it into little balls and onto the baking tray. They don't take long to cook at all. I mean, about 15 minutes. So, put my camera back down. So here we go. Here's our cookie mixture. I'm just going to give it another stir. And you can see now it's much colder. You should be able to get 18 balls out of this. It makes 18 quite large cookies. You don't have to be delicate with it. Just squash it together. So it's a little bit bigger than a golf ball size, okay? Pop it onto your baking tray. Now I'm using a very small baking tray because I'm only doing a few of them. You'll need 2 baking trays for this. This mixture though will stay fresh in the fridge for a good few days, no problem. So you can bake cookies fresh every day. And then send me pictures of your lovely fresh cookies. So you can see I'm squashing it together really well. You do need to squash together really well, because otherwise it's going to fall apart a bit. Okay, I'm just going to do the 3, and then you flatten it just with your fingers a tiny, tiny bit. See, that's broken apart, so we don't want that. So literally gentle, gentle push, very gentle push, and then leave it. Okay, then this mixture, you can literally just cling film it, and then you have it for most of the week. Wash my hands. So I'm waiting for my brownies to come out before I can pop in my white chocolate chip Oshi biscuits. Those can just hang out there for a seckie. So what we have left to do, besides eat something, is just make our frangipani mixture for the top of the pastry. So that's the sponge mixture. So frangipani refers to the fact that it's almond based and it's got this beautiful fragrance. Because frangipani is also a flower. So I think that's possibly where the name originates. So I'm just going to grab my ingredients down here. I'm not going to start doing this mix until I've sorted out the brownie, so I don't want to confuse matters too much and then be caught mid-flow. Okay, so I'm going to give the brownie another minute, literally. You delete all these alarms. There we go. So your kids will have to take your phone or something and set some alarms, or use an old-fashioned egg timer. Okay, I'm taking out the brownies now. They've got like another minute to go, but I'm not going to ruin my brownies for the sake of a minute. Okay. I do think they need another minute. They're very wobbly. There we go. I got over-enthusiastic there. So they should be gooey. There should be a little bit of a wobble, but you should see some cracking on top. And that's a quintessential brownie, is that you've got the cracking on top and then the middle is quite gooey. And that's a combination of having the right recipe so that it works for you, but also not over baking it. Because if you over bake it, all that gooiness is going to dry out. And I'm sure we've all had really horrible, disgusting brownies before that were like dust. I just want to soften my butter a little bit again. You won't have the hard butter problem in South Africa in the middle of the heat. Okay. I'll pause from the frantic baking and take some questions. Does anyone have any questions? How are you all doing? Now, if you're not baking now, because I know this was a bit last minute, you're welcome to message me at any time as you're doing it. And if I see your message, great. If I don't, oops. But if you watch the replay, and you can fast forward me when you want to, you should be fine. You should be okay. You should be hunky-dory. Okay. So I've got 4 more minutes for my pastry base. And I'm just going to grab a big bowl. So for your mixing, when we're creaming butter and sugar and things like that, absolutely use plastic bowls if you want to. It's far less noisy, and it's probably safer with kids, just in case they chip bowls and things like that. But if you need your bowl to be heat resistant to go into microwave, or on top of your pot for melting your chocolate, that does need to be a glass bowl. Okay. Just waiting for my batter to soften a little bit. It's Baltic. I mean, we've for my South African friends, we've had snow in Dublin, and we're not really a snowy country. So it's been into the minus temperatures. It's really been cold. Okay. Brilliant. So let me knock off this alarm. My short crust pastry base for my Bakewell tart is ready. Okay. So there we go. It's just a very light golden color. We don't want it to get brown edges or anything like that. Just leave it alone. This needs to cool down just for a couple of minutes, and it can do so while we are while we're making the mixture to go on top. So it's a layer of pastry, it's a layer of the almond sponge, and a layer of jam. I would use apricot jam as a South African. We love our apricot jam. It goes into so many different things. So today, raspberry or strawberry would be traditional, and today I've actually got a lingonberry jam. It's Swedish, that I'm going to mix with some raspberry jam. It's a little bit on the tart side, and I don't think the folks that are getting it will like that. Okay, my butter has softened. Okay, I'm just going to take my brownie out. Aha, here we go. Okay. So now you can see the cracking. All right. So that's what you want, is the top to crack and the middle to be gooey. And you can kind of tell it's ready if you press the top and it bounces back at you. So chocolate chip cookies going in. These are just the white chocolate chip and OT cookies. I put these on a timer for 12 minutes. They bake sort of 12 to 15 minutes. But I just want to rather look at them and see what they look like. So remember, you can always bake something for longer, but you're in a bind if it's I'll turn my camera. I'm just going to leave my brownies to the side. So remember, let those guys cool down for at least 10 minutes before you try and hooch them out. So I'd say the average oven, like a fan oven, would be about 18 minutes for the brownies. That's what I've discovered in the past, that 18 minutes is good. Maybe your oven isn't so powerful. And it also depends on the size of the oven, because if your oven's bigger, it's not going to get as hot. It doesn't matter what that dial says in it. It's not as hot as a smaller oven. So I've just got a standard 60 centimeter oven. And it has its benefits in the sense of it gets really hot really quickly. So we're all under control. Cookies in the oven. And we're going to, I just have to wash my tongs. I don't have a gazillion of these. So we're going to cream together the butter and the sugar for the frangipani. Again, you can use your wooden spoon. I've got my mixer. So this is just the sugar, the butter first, and then one egg at a time. You always put one egg at a time so that it incorporates better, and then it gets ground almonds and almond essence. So it's very fragrant. The French love a frangipani. The very classic Normandy pear tart is this frangipani mixture with pears inserted into it. It's fabulous. That was always one of the exam recipes when I was teaching professional chefs, because then you would mark them on their pastry and on their frangipani mix. So, there we go. Mine's a little bit melty, because it's going to happen super quick. Now on a low speed, one egg at a time. So put your eggs in a jug like this. Sometimes two will pour out. Oh, hang on, let me teach you something. I've got 1,000 tea towels. So this bowl is going to go flying around. So just put it on a tea towel. So it stays in one place for you. One more egg. Another egg. Oops, I didn't have to stop, but anyway. And another egg. And as you'll hear me bleating on, scrape your sides. I'm looking for a spatula. And many utensils. Okay, let me wash one. And scraped on the sides. Yeah, there's quite a lot of butter there. So it tells me I need to give it another whiz around. But it's nice and light and smooth and fluffy. We'll just give you a lighter sponge. To make double sure I haven't left anything out. I don't think I have. I have a fairly good memory. It's not perfect, but it's okay. Okay, that's good. We're happy out. You can still use your mixers, but I find at this point, now 4 drops of almond essence, because this is a really strong flavor. You don't want to go bananas with it. So at this point, I find it's enough just to use my spatula to mix this, because once the almonds, these are ground almonds. Oh, by the way, my South African friends, ground almonds, the cheapest ground almonds I find, because they're so expensive, you can shop around between Spar and, funny enough, Doorbell Pharmacy and Dis-Chem. And that is where I found, and you can also try Pick and Pay in the health section. For some reason, it's in the health section. And just shop around. If you get a big bag, keep it in the fridge. Because South Africa is so hot. The oils in it can go rancid. And all my nuts and things I actually keep in the freezer to keep them fresh. So this goes nice and thick with the almond in it. So it's not one of the reasons I don't use an electric mixer at this point. There's no need. It's nice and thick. Alrighty, happy days. So I've got some raspberry jam. You need enough jam, obviously, to go across the base of the pastry. So this is nowhere near enough. Nowhere near enough. I'm going to mix it with the lingonberry, but fabulous with apricot jam. So the African mean the apricot jam makes me really happy. Hang on, cookies? Oh no, we're okay for cookies. Sorry, I'm just a little bit neurotic about underbaking them. You know what I realized? I didn't squash mine enough. Oh, I was too gentle. I was going to take a little fork and squash them a little bit. My mixture was super, super cold, so they're staying in one boliki. My Irish students, boliki is diminutive for ball. So I just squash them a little bit. Perfect. But they've still got space to move. There we go. Excellent. So lingonberry jam going in, but this is very tart. I don't recommend it necessarily for this recipe. Anyway, it's just going in. Hang on. I'm going to add some vanilla to the jam just to sweeten it up without using sugar, because it's just, I'm going to add a teaspoon of vanilla. And that's actually quite a typical jam recipe I make. I make strawberry vanilla or raspberry vanilla jam. That should be. If that's not enough jam, then I will add a bit more. Should be okay. my base comes back. So that's had a chance to cool down for a few minutes. It works better if it cools down for a few minutes so that our frangipani mixture doesn't sort of like weld into it. So jam, and then just use the back of a spoon to spread it out. There we go. We get it right up there because you don't want any squares without any jam. Yeah, so that was just enough jam. I eyeballed it. Weigh your jam. Don't do what I just did and just guessed. Chefs have a bad habit of doing that, but with baking you do need to be accurate. Okay, fabulous. So now this isn't going to slice perfectly because my corners are curved. This is a roasting tin, not a baking dish, but that's okay. It really is okay. So now frangipani mixture on top. This is quite thick, okay? So what I would do with it is I would blob it and then spread it because we don't want to churn up the jam. We want nice distinct layers. So sort of blob it into 6 places and then take your spatula and then gently, very gently spread it. As I said, we don't want any churning, so don't be heavy-handed with this little step. And see, there, I churned up some jam. Not the end of the world, but those nice distinct layers are one of the good things about a bake well. Okay, just take a dinner knife and scrape. I've got one little naked edge here. And then I like to just go in and just neaten up my edges a little bit. Just be gentle. So I'm very gently spreading. No churning going on. And then get this into the oven. And this is going to bake about 20 minutes, but I'm going to check it. I'm not going to overdo this guy. If you've gotten any batter up the sides, I always wipe it off because it just burns and it makes it harder to clean then at the end of the day. So we don't need that. So we get the flaked almonds on top. There we go. This is a really delicious layer. And when it's completely cooled down, you're just going to mix icing sugar. It's in your recipe with a little bit of water, and you're going to drizzle it over. But it needs to be cool before you do that because otherwise it is just going to melt into it. It will be a bit gross. So can you see? Here we go. So that's our pastry at the bottom, then our jam, then our frangipani mixture. Oh, there we go. I think that's my cookies. Yes, it is. Okay. So let me just grab my cookies out. Okay. So there we go. So you can see they spread a lot. This is all the butter that's melting, and that's why it's important to chill them first. And also the white chocolate is melting. So you don't want enormous pieces of white chocolate. You want to get them, I wouldn't say pea-sized, a little, 2 peas maybe. So leave them on the tray because they're now very, very soft. What you want is the edges to go brown, okay? So as long as all the edges are brown, they're done. Which I'm actually going to, this one's a little bit darker, so I'm going to pop it back into the oven just for a minute. Because even if you've got a fan oven, there's always going to, not always, but there's mostly going to be a place that's hotter in your oven. So normally at the back, but it varies, depends on how your fan works in your oven. So you'll get to know it, and you'll know that you need to turn around your baking halfway through. But don't do it too soon because things need a chance to rise and to set and to do their thing first before you start moving them around. So I'm literally just pop that back in for a minute so they're all even. So you see my brownie's nice and cracked on the top, and it's lovely and gooey in the middle. So I'm going to take out there we go, it's got a little bit browner. So there's our white chocolate and oaty cookies. So I'm going to give that a few minutes to cool. Excuse the cats. What you'll find is the brownies will crack mostly around the edge. Okay, so I'd say time it for 18 minutes and it'll be perfect. Yeah, mine's also around the edge, and I took it out at that point. Look, it doesn't matter if it's a little bit cracked in the middle, but it's really around the edge, and it's going to sink down once it's done, and it will crack a little bit more. So I'll show you mine. Okay, that's normal. So it's mostly cracked around the edges, but it's going to be nice and gooey underneath that. And remember, we also used real chocolate, which is melted. So it's different if you use cocoa powder. That's more of a cake consistency. So essentially, when you have a brownie recipe that uses cocoa powder in it rather than melted chocolate, the reason why it stays gooey in the middle is two reasons. It's the sheer volume of butter and sugar in the middle that makes it squishy, number one. And that's a very common thing for brownies. It's a huge amount of sugar and butter. And the other thing is that it's slightly underbaked. You haven't overbaked it. Because if you carry on baking it, it will be like a chocolate sheet cake. And that will just be a waste of ingredients. And you'll have to stick a chocolate buttercream on the top. So I'm just going to show you the Bakewell. So the Bakewell, let me just make sure. I mean, I think it's, I recipe tested this. So make sure to, yeah, it says in the recipe 30 minutes, but I'm going to show you how to check it, okay, that it's done, because in my oven it's 25. You can't stuff it up. You really can't. So this isn't done yet, but I'll know it's done. Check it at 20 minutes, that if I touch the top of it, it's going to spring back. It's spongy, okay? So hence the name of sponge cake. So this is definitely not done yet. So we'll stick it back in. But that's just going to do its thing. And a Bakewell you're going to serve cold. Please make a note of this. For the love of God, make a note of this. Do not serve a Bakewell hot, because that layer of jam in the middle becomes molten. It becomes over 100 degrees Celsius. Whoever puts that into their mouth is going to have a serious burn. So a Bakewell is a tea time treat. It's a cake. You never serve it hot. Be really, really careful. It's fine if you leave it to cool in the tin for like half an hour and it's slightly lukewarm or something. But please no molten Bakewell. You will just do yourself an injury, and it doesn't do anything for the taste or the flavor. So just to recap, my lovely shortbread is almost completely cool. My cookies need to cool down. My brownies need 10 minutes, and then I can take out a square and serve it warm. Now for the shortbread, this is called a crank spatula, or sorry, crank palette knife, and this is very handy for digging out shortbread. But if you don't have one of these, it's fine. Just take a dinner knife, take out one, and then the rest will be easier to take out. So the corner one is probably going to crumble for you. That's fine, because you need to get one out to get the rest of them out, and then store those in a cool airtight container once they're completely cool. So I'm going to stop recording now, and I'm going to unmute all of you, and you can ask me any questions you want. So